The United States faces a housing crisis of unprecedented proportions, affecting millions of families across the nation. Millions of Americans are caught in a relentless struggle to keep a roof over their heads, battling rising rents and stagnant wages. The demand for affordable housing far outstrips supply, leaving many in a desperate search for a place to call home. This has created a cutthroat rental market where too many are left behind, unable to secure stable housing. Recent data paints a bleak picture highlighting the severity of the situation. The national vacancy rate hovers at a paltry 5.6%, a low not seen in decades, exacerbating the crisis. This means that for every 100 rental units, a mere 6 are available, making it incredibly difficult to find housing. Competition is fierce, with an average of 14 renters vying for each apartment, driving up prices. This scarcity has driven rental prices to historic highs, pushing the dream of homeownership further out of reach for millions, especially younger generations. The consequences of this crisis are dire, leading to increased evictions and homelessness. Families are forced to make impossible choices between paying rent or putting food on the table, a heartbreaking reality. The stress of housing insecurity takes a toll on mental and physical health, affecting overall well-being. It undermines the fabric of our communities, leading to social and economic decline. We are at a tipping point, and the need for immediate action has never been more urgent. The time to address this crisis is now. The rental crisis is not merely a matter of tight budgets, it is a full-blown affordability crisis that affects millions of lives. A staggering 44 million Americans are burdened by the weight of unaffordable rent, struggling to make ends meet. This means that nearly half of all renters are paying more than 30% of their income on housing, leaving little room for other essential needs like food, healthcare, and education. The situation is particularly dire for low-wage earners who often work multiple jobs. In nearly every state, the lowest 10% of earners simply cannot afford fair market rent, no matter how hard they work. Imagine working a full-time job, yet still struggling to afford a basic one-bedroom apartment. It's a harsh reality. This is the harsh reality for millions of Americans who face constant financial stress. The affordability crisis extends beyond those at the poverty line, affecting a wide range of income levels. Even middle-class families are feeling the squeeze, struggling to maintain their standard of living. Households earning a median income are now spending more than 41% of their earnings on rent. This leaves them with less money for health care, education, and savings, making it difficult to plan for the future. The American dream is becoming increasingly unattainable for far too many, as the cost of living continues to rise. For those at the bottom of the income ladder, the rental crisis is nothing short of a catastrophe. The struggle to secure affordable housing is a daily battle that many low-income families face. Low-income workers, often employed in essential but low-paying jobs, are finding it nearly impossible to find decent, affordable housing. These workers are the backbone of our communities, yet they are the ones who suffer the most. Consider this. The average low-income worker spends a staggering 55% of their income just to keep a roof over their head. This financial burden is unsustainable and leaves little room for other essential expenses. This leaves them with a meager 45% to cover food, transportation, healthcare, and other necessities. The constant juggling of finances takes a toll on their mental and physical health. It's a constant struggle to make ends meet, with little hope for upward mobility. The dream of financial stability seems increasingly out of reach for these families. The gap between income and housing costs is widening at an alarming rate. This growing disparity is pushing more families to the brink of homelessness. The average fair market rent for a one-bedroom apartment now stands at $1,492 per month. This price is far beyond the reach of many low-income earners. In contrast, the average affordable rent for a family of 4 at the poverty line is a mere $694. This stark difference highlights the severity of the housing affordability crisis. This disparity lays bare the stark reality of the affordability crisis for our most vulnerable citizens. Without significant intervention, the situation is likely to worsen, leaving more families without a place to call home. The rental crisis is not confined to low-income communities. It has infiltrated the middle class, eroding their aspirations of homeownership and financial security. The traditional path to the middle class, secure employment, homeownership, and a comfortable retirement is becoming increasingly elusive. The rising cost of rent is a major culprit in this erosion. As rents consume a larger portion of middle-class incomes, saving for a down payment becomes a distant dream. The median home price continues to soar, further widening the gap between aspiration and reality. The consequences are far-reaching. Families are forced to delay major life decisions, such as starting a family or investing in their education. The stress of financial insecurity takes a toll on relationships and overall well-being. The American dream is slipping away from the middle class, replaced by a precarious existence in a volatile rental market. The color of housing insecurity, racial disparities laid bare. The rental crisis is not colorblind. It disproportionately affects communities of color. Decades of discriminatory housing policies, coupled with systemic racism, have created a legacy of inequality that persists today. Black and Hispanic renters face higher rates of rent burden, eviction, and housing instability compared to their white counterparts. They are more likely to live in neighborhoods with fewer resources, higher crime rates, and lower quality housing. The statistics paint a stark picture. Over 60% of renters who are behind on housing payments live in communities of color. This is not a coincidence, but a direct result of systemic inequities that have been allowed to fester for far too long. Addressing the racial disparities in housing is not just a matter of fairness, it is essential for creating a more just and equitable society. Building for whom? The mismatch of supply and demand. One of the most glaring issues fueling the rental crisis is the mismatch between housing supply and demand. While new construction is underway, it is largely failing to address the needs of those most affected by the affordability crisis. A significant portion of new multifamily units are luxury apartments catering to higher-income earners. These developments may look impressive on a city skyline, but they do little to alleviate the suffering of those struggling to afford a basic, decent place to live. The shortage of affordable housing is staggering. Experts estimate that we need at least 7 million more affordable rental homes just to meet the needs of those at or below the poverty line. This requires a fundamental shift in our approach to housing policy, one that prioritizes the needs of low and moderate income renters. Evicted, the heartbreaking toll of housing instability. Eviction, the most brutal consequence of the rental crisis, is reaching epidemic proportions. Families are being uprooted from their homes, often with little warning and even fewer options. The trauma of eviction can have long-lasting consequences, leading to job loss, financial ruin, and even homelessness. The statistics are alarming. Eviction filings are surging across the country, particularly in cities where rent growth has been most extreme. This is a crisis within a crisis, leaving vulnerable families teetering on the edge of homelessness. The human cost of eviction is immeasurable. Children are forced to switch schools, disrupting their education and social networks. Families lose their belongings, their sense of stability, and their dignity. Eviction is not just a housing issue. It is a public health crisis, a moral failing, and a stain on our national conscience. Profits over people. Unfair practices in a tight market. The rental crisis has exposed the dark underbelly of the housing market, where some landlords prioritize profits over people. Unfair and often illegal practices are rampant, leaving renters vulnerable to exploitation and abuse. Some landlords are taking advantage of the tight market to impose exorbitant rent increases, often exceeding legal limits. Others are neglecting necessary repairs, creating unsafe and unhealthy living conditions. Still others are resorting to discriminatory practices, denying housing based on race, ethnicity, or source of income. The pandemic, while exacerbating the crisis, also shone a light on the egregious behavior of some corporate landlords. Despite receiving government assistance, these companies continued to file eviction actions against struggling tenants. This blatant disregard for human decency underscores the urgent need for stronger tenant protections and stricter enforcement of existing laws. Towards a more equitable housing future. The rental crisis is a multifaceted problem that demands a comprehensive and compassionate response. It is a moral imperative to ensure that every American has access to safe, stable, and affordable housing. We need to invest massively in the construction and preservation of affordable housing. This includes expanding existing programs like the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit and exploring innovative solutions like community land trusts and social housing models. We must strengthen tenant protections and crack down on unfair landlord practices. This includes enacting just cause eviction laws, establishing rent control measures, and providing legal aid to tenants facing eviction. The rental crisis is a defining issue of our time. It is time for our elected officials to treat it with the urgency it deserves and take bold action to create a more equitable and just housing future for all Americans.